I am Zaria Cross, 31 years old, from Texas. The night everything shattered started with laughter, the kind that fills a room, stretches across glasses of champagne, and hides the sound of your heart trying to warn you. We were at the Lantern, a dimly lit rooftop bar in Dallas, celebrating my boyfriend Carter's promotion. He just turned 32, and we'd been together for 6 years. Long enough for people to start asking when. That word, when, had become the rhythm of my life. When are you getting engaged? When are you having kids? When are you going to stop waiting? I used to laugh it off. I believed patience was love's proof. That night, I was sure he'd finally ask. He had reserved a private table, the skyline glowing behind him. My best friend Elena had helped him plan it. She sat 2 tables over with her fiancé, raising her glass toward us in mock celebration. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. When the waiter brought out dessert, my hands were trembling. A small cake, white frosting, 1 candle. Carter smiled, that soft, deliberate smile that always made me melt. "Make a wish," he said. I closed my eyes. I wished for him to say the words I'd been rehearsing answers for. When I opened them, he was standing. My heart jumped. The lights dimmed slightly. Everyone nearby clapped, assuming the same thing I did. But then he turned, knelt, and faced Elena, not me. Her hand flew to her mouth. The crowd gasped and the city spun. The ring box in his hand glinted like a knife under the fairy lights. "Elena," he said, voice trembling but sure, "will you marry me?" My breath caught. The room blurred. People began cheering. My body didn't move. My brain screamed that I had misunderstood, that this was a prank, that there was some hidden camera. But her tears were real. Her yes cracked the night open. The sound of the crowd faded. All I could hear was my pulse roaring in my ears. Carter stood, slid the ring onto her finger, the same ring design I'd pointed out in a jewelry shop months before, and kissed her. The waiter looked at me, confused, realizing the mistake. My untouched dessert sat between us, mocking me with its single candle, still flickering in the draft. I stood up so slowly it felt like the world had to catch up. My chair scraped the floor, a raw, scraping sound that cut through the applause. Elena saw me then. Her eyes widened, her smile faltered, but Carter didn't turn. He was still basking in the moment he'd built on my trust. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't shake. "Congratulations," I said. She whispered, "Zaria, wait." But I was already walking away. Past the bar, past the strangers staring, past the future I'd been foolish enough to imagine. Outside, Dallas glowed like nothing had happened. Neon and streetlights painted everything gold and cruel. I stood under the buzzing sign and tried to breathe, but each inhale felt like glass. We'd met in college, Carter with his easy smile, Elena with her fearless energy, and me, the quiet one who believed loyalty meant safety. The 3 of us were inseparable. I introduced them. I trusted them. We shared birthdays, secrets, apartment keys. I was the bridge between them, the one who believed friendship and love could live in the same circle. Looking back, there were cracks. The kind you paint over because the wall still stands. There was the time I found his jacket at her place after she claimed she hadn't seen him in weeks. She said he'd dropped by to fix her sink. He said the same. I believed them both. There was the text I saw once on his phone. Her name, a heart emoji, nothing else. He laughed. "She's just dramatic." I laughed too. Because that's what trust does. It teaches you to ignore proof. I didn't go home that night. I walked for hours, heels in hand, tears drying on my face in the Texas heat. My phone buzzed endlessly, Carter calling, Elena texting. I didn't answer either. At 2 a.m., I found myself outside my mother's house in Oak Cliff. The porch light was on. It always was. She opened the door, her face soft with sleep and worry. "Baby?" I collapsed into her arms like I was 16 again. She didn't ask questions right away. She just held me. When I finally spoke, the words felt foreign. He proposed. To her, my mother's arms stiffened. "Elena?" I nodded. She exhaled, a long, deep sound that seemed to carry years of warning she'd swallowed. "And now you know. I pulled back. You knew? Not for sure, she said gently. But I've seen the way she looks at him. The way he lets her. I wanted to scream, to ask why she hadn't told me. But I already knew the answer. You can't protect someone who refuses to see the fire. She made me tea. We sat at the kitchen table in silence. The clock ticked, each second marking the death of the girl I'd been that morning. At dawn, I packed the few things I'd left at Carter's apartment. Photos, books, a toothbrush, and walked out. He was asleep when I left. Elena curled on the couch like she belonged there. Maybe she did. I didn't slam the door. I wanted the silence to be his first punishment. The days that followed blurred. Friends sent texts filled with shock and gossip. Some unfriended Elena. Others asked me if I was okay. I wasn't. But I learned quickly that grief doesn't ask for company. It builds walls. I replayed that moment in my head over and over. The ring, the crowd, the sound of her yes. Every replay hurt less, but burned deeper. I kept hearing my mother's voice. And now you know. Yes. Now I knew. And knowledge, I realized, was the first step to power. They thought they'd broken me. But I was still standing, and I was about to make sure neither of them would ever stand so tall again. The morning after the rooftop, I woke up in my old room at my mother's house, the one with the peeling star stickers on the ceiling and the faded track ribbons thumbtacked above the desk. The air smelled like laundry soap and cinnamon. For a moment, I could pretend I was 17, worried about grades, not rings. Then my phone lit up with missed calls, and the pretending ended. I didn't answer Carter. I didn't answer Elena. I let their names stack into a silent monument of everything I refused to carry anymore. Instead, I opened the Notes app and wrote a single line. All the little lies I missed. Under it, I started a list. The jacket at her apartment I'd forgiven. The text with the heart I'd laughed off. The day he forgot his wallet and Elena covered lunch, eyes lingering a second too long when she slid the card back. The time he said he was stuck late at work. And she posted a story from a concert with a shadow that looked exactly like his jawline beside her. When you love someone, you build them a courtroom inside your chest where evidence gets misfiled as coincidence. Breakfast? My mother called from the hallway. I'm not hungry, I said. Though I was starved for something that tasted like truth. She came in anyway, set a plate of eggs on my desk, and sat on the bed. Eat something, Z. I picked up the fork and moved the eggs around like a child. Did I do this to myself? I asked softly. By not seeing? She exhaled. You saw. You just didn't want to believe. I pressed my thumb into a chip on the desk paint until it hurt. She was my best friend. Sometimes, my mother said, people who love the same man don't love each other at all. I wiped my eyes with the inside of my wrist. That's poetry for betrayal. It's also math, she said. There was only one seat at that table and she pulled it out from under you. After she left, I scrolled through old photos. Road trips, birthdays, housewarmings. Carter always in the middle, Elena leaning in, me holding the camera. I noticed things I'd never allowed myself to see. His hand on the back of her chair during dinner. The way she tagged him in jokes at 2 a.m., how they stood a little too close in group shots, pretending they were both reaching for the same bottle or the same bowl. Every oops was choreography. I'd mistaken timing for fate. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments. And subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. By noon, texts from friends hardened into sides. Tasha, girl, I will fight somebody. Maya, are you okay? I can come now. Jonah, I always thought he was calculating. A DM from a mutual read. We all knew something was weird. Didn't know it was this, new. The word landed like a dropped plate. My humiliation wasn't private. It had community witnesses. Around 3, my phone buzzed again. Elena, this time. Voicemail. Voice soft with manufactured ache. Zaria, please call me. You have to understand. It just happened. We didn't plan it. I love you. I always will. I replayed it 5 times, hunting for a seam in her performance. There wasn't one. She had rehearsed this apology for months. I typed a reply and erased it. Typed another, erased that too. Then I sent one line. Bring me my spare key. 30 minutes later, her little silver coupe pulled up in front of my mother's house. She stepped out in an oversized sweatshirt, face bare, playing the role of repentant girl. I met her on the porch. The Texas sun made everything too honest. She held out the key on a cactus keychain I'd bought her once in Marfa. I never meant to. I cut in. How long? Her eyes flickered. A few months. But it wasn't like that. Like what? Like cheating, she said quickly. It was feelings getting stronger. We tried to stop them. I let a laugh escape, sharp enough to cut. Behind my back? Tears pooled. I didn't want to hurt you. You wanted him, I said. You just hoped I'd hand him to you so you wouldn't have to feel guilty. She flinched. You and Carter were stuck, Z. You kept waiting for him to change. He never would. We are engaged, I finished, using a ring I showed him. She glanced down at the diamond, then tucked her hand into her sleeve like she could hide it from my memory. He said you didn't want that one. He says a lot. I opened my palm. Key. She placed it there, and I felt every year of our friendship press into that metal. 100 coffees, secrets, sleepovers, the time she cried on my shoulder after a breakup and swore she'd never cross a line like this with anyone. Lies have long roots. I hope someday you can forgive me, she whispered. I stepped back, closed my fingers around the key. I hope someday you can forgive yourself. It will take longer. She winced. You won't answer my texts? No, I said. This is our last conversation. Her mouth trembled. I love you. Love doesn't do this, I said, and walked back inside before the wind could blow her apology into my house. That night, Carter tried again. Voicemail this time. No baby, just my name like a plea he'd bought on sale. Zaria, I need to explain. It wasn't what it looked like at the bar. I mean, it was, but not the way you think. I was going to talk to you first. The timing got ugly, I said to the empty room. On purpose? I didn't call back. He texted, we can be adults. Then, you'll always be important to me. Then, the one that turned my stomach. We can still be friends. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Friends was what men offer women after stealing their time. It is a consolation prize you have to swallow whole. The next morning, I posted a photo of the sky over Oak Cliff, wide and endless. Caption, starting line. I turned off comments. Then I began the mundane work of ending a life. I canceled the joint storage unit, removed my name from utilities at his apartment, called the venue we'd once toured just to look, and asked them to delete our interest from their file. The receptionist said, I'm sorry, in a voice that sounded practiced for brides and funerals. I bagged the things that smelled like him. A gray hoodie, a cologne bottle, a baseball cap he let me borrow. I found a small gift bag with gold tissue from my last birthday. No card inside. I remembered how Elena had organized that party, how she'd stayed late to clean up, how she hugged me and whispered, You deserve everything. She'd been right. She just thought everything included my boyfriend. Little lies. The time she insisted on being my +1 for an office gala when Carter had the flu. The way she asked to try on my new lipstick and kept the tube. How she borrowed my keys, just in case I need to check on the cat, and never returned them until I asked. Each act normal on its own, sinister as a chain. In the afternoon, I drove to White Rock Lake and parked where the water looked like melted steel. I sat with the windows down and let the wind tangle my hair. I remembered freshman year, the three of us at an off-campus party, a circle of solo cups and bad music. Carter had leaned to me and said, You and me, Z, forever. Elena had filmed us kissing and yelled, My favorite couple! When I asked her to send the video the next day, she said she lost it. Of course she had. My phone buzzed again. Tasha, you want the truth? I think Elena always wanted your life. She just took the shortcut. I typed, Then I'll build a life with no shortcuts. On my way home, I stopped at a jeweler and sold the simple gold necklace Carter bought me on our 5-year anniversary. I took the cash and drove to a hardware store. I bought a new deadbolt for my own apartment, even though I wasn't ready to sleep there yet. and a small safe. When the cashier asked if I needed help, I said, "No, ma'am," and felt something settle in my voice like a foundation finally poured. Back at my mother's, I made a new list under the first, non-negotiables. No access without consent. No secrets I have to protect. No waiting for promises to grow up. No friendships that require me to disappear to keep them. I taped it inside my closet door. At sunset, my mother knocked. "Walk?" We strolled the block, the sky watercoloring itself pink and orange. I told her about the lists, the key, the jewelry. She nodded. That's how you end things, with hands. With actions. At the corner, she stopped and faced me. "One more thing." "What?" "Stop collecting their lies like they're your burden." Her eyes softened. "Collect your own truth. That's the only list that matters." When we got home, I pulled out a shoebox of photos and slid out the ones with the three of us. Birthday candles, a state fair selfie, a road sign to Austin. I didn't burn them. I put them in the safe. They weren't evidence anymore. They were artifacts from a museum I didn't plan to visit again. Before bed, I sent one text to Carter. "Return my grandmother's quilt by Friday. Leave it with the front office. Don't contact me again." He replied within seconds. "You're being dramatic." I typed, "I'm being done." Then I blocked his number. I turned off the light and lay there listening to the ceiling fan thrum. For the first time since the rooftop, the memory didn't slice me open. It just sat beside me, quiet, like a portrait of someone I used to be. All the little lies had done their work. Now I would do mine. I thought I'd already reached my breaking point that night on the rooftop. I was wrong. Breaking, I learned, doesn't happen in one clean snap. It happens in a series of quiet splinters. For weeks after, I tried to build normal from the ashes. I returned to work, smiled at the right times, and convinced everyone I was healing. But the truth was, healing felt like choking on invisible dust. I couldn't walk through downtown without seeing pieces of them. A coffee shop where the three of us used to go after yoga, a mural we'd taken photos in front of. Every corner of Dallas had their fingerprints on it. It felt like they had stolen not just my relationship, but the geography of my life. I tried to stay busy. I joined a local art collective, threw myself into new projects, painted until my fingers cramped. But even paint couldn't cover what I felt when their engagement photos appeared on my feed one morning. They stood in front of a field of wildflowers. She wore ivory. He wore the smile I used to know. The caption read, "When love is right, it just finds a way." I stared at it so long my phone dimmed. Then I scrolled through the comments. "So happy for you both. Meant to be. You two are perfect together." Each heart emoji was another match dropped into my chest. The post had gone up at midnight, which meant she wanted me to see it first thing. By noon, the picture was everywhere. Mutual friends reposting, tagging, congratulating. My DMs flooded. "Are you seeing this? Z, I'm so sorry." "She's bold as hell." I muted every notification. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I screamed. Not words, not curses, just sound. Raw, animal, alive. My mother rushed in from the living room. "Zaria?" I couldn't speak. I sank to the floor, shaking, hands pressed to my temples. She knelt beside me, wrapping her arms around me. "Baby, breathe." "I wasted 6 years," I whispered. 6 years on a man who was just waiting for the better option to walk in. "You didn't waste," she said softly. "You invested, and now you know not to give that much to someone who doesn't earn it." Her words should have helped. They didn't. They only made the loss sharper, more defined. That night, I drove to my old apartment. I told myself it was to grab a few boxes I'd forgotten, but it wasn't. I wanted to see if he still lived like I was gone. His car was there. The porch light was on. Through the window, I saw shadows moving, his and hers. She was in my old hoodie, the one that used to smell like his cologne. I almost knocked. Almost. Instead, I stood outside in the cold, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles hurt, watching the life I had built become someone else's stage. When I finally turned away, I realized something. I wasn't crying anymore. The sadness had burned itself out, and what was left wasn't emptiness. It was precision. I went home and opened my notebook again. Under all the little lies I missed, I wrote a new title, Everything I will take back. The next day at work, my boss Clara called me into her office. "You've been off your game lately," she said gently. "I know. You're one of our best designers, Zaria. I don't want to lose you." "Take some time off if you need it." I hesitated. "Actually, can I work remotely for a while?" She nodded. "As long as the deadlines are met." That night, I packed my laptop, paints, and notebooks, and drove out to Marfa, a quiet desert town hours away. No city lights, no familiar streets, just silence and horizon. I rented a small cabin from an older woman named June. She didn't ask questions. She handed me the keys, pointed to a dusty studio out back, and said, "You look like someone who needs space." She was right. For days I painted until my hands hurt. The desert air stripped everything down to what was necessary: color, light, anger, breath. I painted them too. Carter's eyes, Elena's smile, their hands, their betrayal. Each brushstroke was an exorcism. By the 5th day, the anger transformed into something else. Clarity. I started planning, not how to hurt them, but how to reclaim what they had taken. My reputation, my narrative, my self-worth. Because they weren't just cheaters. They were architects of illusion. And I had been their masterpiece. But not anymore. A week later, I got an email from Elena's sister, Sophie. Subject line, "You deserve to know." Inside was a screenshot of a message between Elena and Carter from last year, months before the proposal. Elena, "She still thinks you're proposing this summer?" Carter, "I'll tell her soon. I just want to do it clean." Elena, "You've been saying that for a year." Carter, "She's been loyal." I feel bad. The timestamp, 3 months before my birthday. They had been planning it even while he kissed me goodnight. That was my real breaking point. Not the rooftop. Not the photos. That message. That cowardly guilt disguised as decency. I didn't cry. I forwarded the message to myself, and then deleted Sophie's email. I didn't want pity from anyone connected to them. Then I opened a new folder on my laptop. Reclaim Project. Inside, I started documenting everything. Texts, photos, dates, screenshots. I didn't know yet what I would do with them. But I knew I would need them. Because when people betray you so publicly, the only thing that hurts them more than exposure is indifference followed by success. And I was about to make both my weapons. Before leaving Marfa, I called my mother. "I think I found my breaking point," I said. "And?" "I'm still standing." She smiled through the line. "That means it's not the end, baby. It's the beginning." The wind outside howled across the desert like applause. I looked up at the stars and whispered, "Watch me." I came back from Marfa with a steadier pulse and a sunburned nose, but Dallas greeted me with the same silence I had left behind. My apartment smelled like dust and the perfume I used to wear for him. The walls knew too much. I stood there, keys still in my hand, and whispered, "We're starting over." I changed the locks that night. Every turn of the screwdriver sounded like punctuation in a sentence I was finally finishing. The next morning, sunlight poured through the blinds like nothing bad had ever happened. For the first time in months, I didn't check my phone. I drank coffee standing at the window, staring down at the city that had watched me fall apart. It didn't care. That made me love it more. The first week alone was strange. I kept expecting to hear his footsteps, the sound of him humming off-key in the shower. Instead, there was just the hum of my refrigerator. People always say loneliness is empty. They're wrong. It's crowded, with memories, regrets, and what-ifs that never stop talking. I tried to silence them by staying busy. I cooked too much food for one person, painted late into the night, answered work emails at 2 a.m. My boss, Clara, texted me, "You don't have to prove anything. Just breathe." I didn't know how to explain that working was my way of breathing. The hardest hours were the ones between 10 and midnight, when the world slows down and you remember everything you're trying to forget. That was when I missed him most. Not the man he was, but the routine we built. The Sunday grocery runs, the Netflix arguments, the comfort of predictability. It's a cruel thing, missing someone you don't respect anymore. I started seeing a therapist, Ren. She was soft-spoken and asked questions that cut deep. "What does loneliness want from you?" she said once. I laughed. "Company," she smiled. "Maybe attention. Maybe it just wants to be seen." I spent days trying to understand that. Maybe loneliness isn't punishment. Maybe it's an invitation to meet yourself again. So I did. I started saying my own name in the mirror each morning. "Good morning, Zaria." At first it felt stupid. Then it started to sound like a promise. My mother called every evening. "You eating?" she'd ask. "You sleeping?" I'd lie, say yes to both. She told me stories about her own heartbreaks, about the man she almost married who chose someone else. "It took me a year to stop checking the mailbox," she said. "But one day, I realized I didn't want his letters anymore." "Did he ever apologize?" I asked. "No," she said. That was the gift. I thought about Carter and Elena, how their silence was the only apology I'd get. Some nights I wanted to send her a message. Something sharp, something that would land like a mirror in her lap. But I never did. Let them think they'd won. The quieter I got, the louder their guilt would sound. One Saturday, Tasha showed up at my door unannounced with iced coffee and determination. "You can't rot in here forever," she said. "Come with me." She drove us to a flea market. Rows of furniture, vintage clothes, chipped teacups. "Pick something that's just for you," she insisted. I found an old oak table, sturdy but scarred, with initials carved into the underside. The seller said it belonged to a writer who used to pen love letters there. I smiled. Perfect. At home, I set it near the window, laid out my paints, and wrote my first letter to myself. I thanked me for surviving. I promised to stop apologizing for staying. I signed it, with love, the woman who kept going. When the letter dried, I folded it into a box where I used to keep keepsakes from Carter. I replaced every photo, every movie ticket, every note. My memories were under new management now. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. Weeks passed. I got better at being alone. I took long walks after work, stopped explaining my silence to anyone. Loneliness, I realized, wasn't a void. It was a space I could decorate. I bought plants, rearranged my living room, changed my sheets from his favorite navy blue to mine, terracotta, warm and defiant. One night I saw them at a distance, Carter and Elena at a restaurant patio downtown. They were laughing, her hand on his arm. He looked older. I didn't wave. I didn't freeze. I just kept walking, the sound of my heels steady against the pavement. They didn't notice me. That was good. It meant I had finally stepped out of their story. Later that night, Ren asked in therapy, "What did you feel when you saw them?" "Nothing," I said, surprised. She smiled. "That's everything." After that, I started sleeping through the night again. I stopped dreaming of the rooftop. The candle, the ring, the betrayal. They were just scenes from a movie I no longer wanted to rewatch. My mother visited one weekend and looked around my apartment. "It feels different in here," she said. "It's mine now," I told her. She smiled and hugged me tight. That night, as she slept in the guest room, I stood at the window and watched the city lights blink like a heartbeat. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a supporting character. I felt like the author. When love turns into loneliness, it doesn't mean you've lost. It means you've been handed the pen. And I was just getting started. There's a single morning when you wake up and realize you aren't waiting for them to change anymore. That's when power begins. Mine started at 6:32 a.m. on a Tuesday, sunlight cutting across the bed like a quiet declaration that I was still here. I rolled out of bed, brewed coffee, and opened my laptop. No tears, no shaking hands, just a clear mind. It had been weeks since I'd seen them at that restaurant, and the image no longer stung. It simply existed. Like a photograph from a life I used to rent. The first thing I did was delete my old email address, the one tied to years of photos, messages, receipts of love and lies. I made a new one, Zaria Cross Creates. It felt like a new name, a beginning. Work came easily that week, Clara noticed. "You've got your spark back," she said during our call. "Keep going." "I plan to," I replied. At night, I painted again, but not sadness this time. Fire. Canvas after canvas of women standing in places they'd once been told they didn't belong. Bold strokes, no erasing. My art became my declaration. Each piece was a page in a story I refused to let them write for me. Still, revenge isn't always art. It's preparation. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. One afternoon, I received an invitation to Elena and Carter's engagement party. I laughed out loud. The audacity was almost poetic. The email said, "We'd love for you to come celebrate love and new beginnings." It was sent from a joint address, Forever Carter and Elena. I didn't delete it. I starred it. Then I started thinking. I didn't want to ruin their night with chaos. I wanted them to face themselves, with everyone watching. I began collecting again, but this time, not pain, proof. Sophie sent me more screenshots. Messages showing how Elena had encouraged Carter to keep Zaria close until after the promotion, because my contacts at work had helped his career. I filed them neatly. The universe had given me my opening. The next week, Clara approached me about presenting our new design campaign to a potential client, a fashion startup Elena's PR firm had recently partnered with. "I know it might be awkward," Clara said carefully. I smiled. "Not at all. I'm ready." At the meeting, Elena walked in 10 minutes late, perfectly styled, her smile brittle when she saw me. "Zaria?" she said, her voice syrupy. "It's been forever." 6 months, I said, offering my hand. "Feels shorter," her eyes flickered. Carter wasn't there, but his name was all over the presentation notes she carried. I watched her stumble through her introduction, words tangling. My turn came. I stood, calm, poised, and laid out our campaign. Clean visuals, honest storytelling. Everything she wasn't. By the end, the client said, "We'll go with Zaria's direction." Elena smiled through clenched teeth. "Of course." Afterward, she caught me in the hallway. "You don't have to compete with me." I met her gaze. "You're right. I don't." I left before she could respond. That evening, I went home and opened the starred invitation again. The date was 2 weeks away. I decided I'd go, but not to confront her. To close the circle. In those 2 weeks, I worked, painted, healed, and built. I updated my portfolio, secured 3 new clients, and posted one of my paintings online. A woman walking away from a burning city, untouched by smoke. It went viral. Messages poured in. Women from everywhere sharing their own stories. One wrote, "You made me brave enough to leave." That message felt better than any apology Carter could ever give. When the night of the engagement party came, I dressed in a simple black dress, minimal makeup, hair loose. My mother watched from the doorway. "You sure about this?" "Yes," I said. "I'm not going for them. I'm going for me." The venue was one of those glass-walled ballrooms downtown, the kind where people toast under chandeliers and pretend their secrets don't echo. I walked in, nodding politely as whispers followed. Elena froze when she saw me. Carter turned pale. "Zaria," she said finally, walking over, her voice tight. "You came." "I did," I said. "You invited me?" Carter opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "Don't worry. I'm not here to make a scene." I handed him a small envelope. "Just something for you both." Inside was a printed email chain. Her messages to him, his to her, the proof of their timing, their deceit, their use of me to advance his promotion. "Consider it a wedding gift," I said softly. He stared at the papers, color draining from his face. Around us, the crowd continued chatting, oblivious. "You can't just," she started. "I can," I said. "You taught me how." I turned and walked out before they could respond. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I just exhaled, deeply, like something inside me had unclenched. Halfway down the block, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "You'll regret this." I smiled. Already did. Months ago. Then I blocked the number. That night, I didn't dream of them. I dreamed of color. Orange, red, gold, like sunrise. I woke up with paint on my hands, the scent of possibility thick in the air. By morning, messages had spread. Their firm had suspended them pending review for ethical concerns. I didn't share the story. I didn't need to. The truth has a way of echoing once you stop whispering. I poured myself a coffee and looked out at the city again, the same skyline where my heartbreak began. It looked different now, mine again. That was the moment I knew. Power doesn't come from revenge. It comes from remembering who you were before they convinced you to forget. And that morning, with sunlight spilling across my kitchen and peace humming in my chest, I remembered everything. Power isn't loud in the beginning. It's paperwork, calendars, folders named too plainly for anyone to fear them. After the engagement party, I didn't celebrate. I cleaned my kitchen, washed a single mug, and opened my laptop. The folder I created was called Proof. Inside, I made subfolders: timeline, screenshots, work conflicts, messages from Sophie, public posts. Small names. Big future. By noon the next day, the city had started doing what cities do, turning scandal into weather. I got a text from a friend in PR. Heard they were temporarily benched. A line like that doesn't sound like justice. It sounds like a recess. Recess ends. I needed the bell that sends everyone back to class. I called Clara. We should formalize what happened at the client pitch, I said. You mean her conflict of interest? And his, I added. They use my contacts to advance his promotion. I want that in writing. Clara's voice sharpened. Send me everything. I'll have legal package it. I spent the afternoon building the timeline. Dates, names, places. The day I introduced them, the concert she accidentally posted with his silhouette, the lunch where she covered for his empty wallet, the week he told me we'd talk about next steps, the exact night their private messages promised an after-promotion reveal. I added screenshots. I didn't edit the language or dramatize. Facts make better knives. I filed 2 formal complaints, one with their firm's ethics committee and one with the regional PR association. I didn't ask them to punish. I asked them to review. The ask matters. People cooperate with reason faster than they defend against rage. That night, I blocked another unknown number. Then another. Finally, a third message slid through from a different line. Stop trying to destroy us. I typed back, I'm protecting me. Then I muted the thread. Protection looks like indifference on the surface. Underneath, it's a locked door. Enduring their pettiness was part of the setup. Elena posted a soft focus photo of her hand on his chest, diamond catching light. Caption, when you know, you know. Comments began to tilt, less unanimous, more cautious. Some mutuals wrote hearts. Others wrote nothing at all. Silence, used right, is a vote. Tasha came over with takeout and a look that meant business. If you're going to build this, build it right, she said, opening cartons on my new oak table. Stop responding to them directly. Put your energy into places that pay you back. What does that look like? I asked. She pulled a pen from her hair and wrote on a napkin. Legal, work, art, community. 4 columns. Legal keeps them small. Work keeps you fed. Art keeps you honest. Community keeps you sane. I taped the napkin to the wall. The legal column meant I booked a consultation with a lawyer named Reyes. He didn't blink when I told him about the rooftop, the proposal, the engagement party envelope. He skimmed the folder calmly. Defamation, if they lie about you professionally. Ethics violations, conflicts of interest, potential misuse of proprietary contacts. You already did most of the work. I'm tired of doing work for them, I said. You're doing it for you, he corrected. He drafted a letter reminding their firm and the association of the complaint numbers and the evidence I'd preserved. No threats, no chest beating. Just the suggestion of consequences standing in the doorway. Work meant I doubled down on excellence. I pitched 2 campaigns in 1 week, both approved. Clara slid me a message. Board noticed. Keep going. The more my name rose on its own merits, the smaller theirs became by comparison. That's the math of reputation. Addition beats subtraction. Art meant I refined the series that had gone viral. I titled it Borrowed Fires. Portraits of women lit by flames they didn't start but refused to let die on them. An independent gallery in Deep Ellum offered me a small show. The owner, a woman with silver hair and sneakers that squeaked, said, "We need this voice. I spent nights painting while the city hissed and breathed beyond my windows. The canvases dried like pages. Community meant I stopped hiding. I hosted a Sunday circle at my apartment. Women, coffee, chairs borrowed from neighbors. We didn't gossip. We traded strategies. A nurse taught us how to document harassment without escalating. A paralegal explained what to write in an email when a boundary gets crossed at work. I shared my timeline template. We passed it around like bread. Some cruelty still found me. An anonymous account messaged my clients. Be careful. She's unstable. It backfired. Clara's reply was a screenshot sent back to me with, "We know exactly who sends these, and it isn't you." When you build your receipts right, people recognize the smell of smoke from the other side. One late afternoon, Sophie called. I ignored the first ring, then answered the second. "They're saying you're obsessed," she blurted. "That you're trying to ruin their wedding." "I don't want their wedding," I said. "I want my name clean." She hesitated. "There's more." A pause. "They forged a vendor reference using your name. For a brand you worked with." I found the draft on Elena's desktop. She didn't send it. Yet. My stomach dropped. Forged. The word wrapped itself around the old word, engaged, and the pair of them looked like a matching set. "Send me the file," I said. "Metadata too, then back up your laptop." "You're not mad at me?" "Angry is for people I still expect things from," I said. "I expect truth from you. That's it." When her email arrived, I added it to work conflicts. I wrote a clean summary for Clara and Reyes. That night, I slept with my phone on Do Not Disturb and my mind surprisingly quiet. This was no longer about heartbreak. It was about integrity. My mother watched the pace I kept, steady, unspectacular. "You're building something," she said one morning as she trimmed flowers at her kitchen sink. "A case?" "A life," she said. "One where their wind can't knock you down." News from their side trickled in. The firm reassigned a client after the ethics committee opened an internal review. Elena's PR pitch calendar suddenly looked lighter. Her subtweets turned vague and sour. Carter posted a gym selfie with a caption about resilience. Men love the word resilience when they mean resistance to accountability. I kept my focus. The gallery date drew closer. I wrote the artist's statement with care. This collection is for anyone who has been told to wait while others write their ending. These paintings are not revenge. They are records of survival and design for rebuilding. The owner read it and nodded. "It's clean," she said. "No names. All impact." The last piece of the setup came from a place I didn't expect. My old landlord. He emailed a notice addressed to both me and Carter. Security deposit reconciliation. "He listed damages from your move-out as yours," the landlord wrote, "but the dates don't line up." He attached photos. A stain on a rug I never owned. A broken lamp I'd never seen. A date stamp 3 weeks after I left. Sloppy. Typical. I forwarded it to Reyes. He replied within minutes. "Pattern matters." Keep stacking it. Pattern matters. I wrote the phrase on the napkin wall right under community. The week of the show, I felt the cruelty's last spasm. A bouquet arrived with no card. White roses. The kind Elena loved. I didn't bring them inside. I left them on the stoop and watched bees find them. Some gifts belonged to insects. That evening, a private number rang. I let it go to voicemail. His voice. "We can fix this if you stop." We. Even now, the word wanted entry. I deleted the message. Then I added the timestamp to timeline. Even ghostly footprints. On opening night, the gallery filled slowly. Strangers first, then friends. Then people I knew would report back to them. I didn't flinch. I wore white sneakers like the owner, a black dress the color of clean ink. I stood where the light fell soft. Women stopped in front of borrowed fires that were 7. A figure with her back to a cityscape, a small unlit candle on a table behind her. They lingered. One said, "I know this feeling." Another whispered, "Me too." Halfway through the night, Clara arrived with 2 board members in tow. "You look like yourself," she said. "I finally am," I answered. Across the room, I saw Sophie slip in, hair tucked into a scarf, eyes scanning. She didn't approach. She didn't need to. She had already done the bravest thing a person on the wrong side of a story can do. She told the truth and kept telling it. As the crowd thinned, I stepped outside for air. The street smelled like rain and hot metal. Tasha joined me on the curb with paper cups of cheap gallery wine. "You ready?" she asked. "For what?" "For the part after setup," she said, grinning. "The part where gravity takes over." I looked up at the dark, familiar sky. Somewhere, they were still spinning their version, still collecting sympathy, still balancing on a pedestal built from my silence. But my silence was gone. In its place stood proof, a community, a show, a plan, and a woman who no longer mistook waiting for love. "I'm ready," I said. The strike would come soon enough. I didn't have to chase it. I just had to be steady when it arrived. The day it all broke open started quietly. No thunder, no drama, just my phone buzzing at 8:17 a.m. with a message from Clara. "The committee meeting is today. You might want to check your email later." I made coffee, the same way I had through every stage of the mess, and sat at my kitchen table with the napkin plan still taped to the wall. I'd spent weeks building the scaffolding. Now gravity would do its work. By 10 o'clock, the inbox dinged. The subject line was sterile. Internal review findings. The summary wasn't. After a thorough investigation, the committee finds multiple instances of conflict of interest, misrepresentation of client credentials, and breach of ethical conduct by the parties in question. They had attached the documentation, the very screenshots and timelines I had quietly stacked. There was a note at the end. "We appreciate Ms. Cross's cooperation in preserving the integrity of this industry." I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Reyes with 2 words. "It's done." By noon, the city had found out. Someone leaked the memo. It spread through group chats, then LinkedIn. Their firm's post about strong leadership vanished, replaced by a neutral press statement. 2 senior team members are on indefinite leave pending review. Elena's social media went dark. Carter's account locked. My phone started vibrating with messages. "Tasha first. You did it." "You actually did it," I typed back. "No, the truth did." At work, Clara called me into her office. "You okay?" she asked. "I thought I would feel louder," I said. "I just feel steady." "That's what real wins sound like," she said. "Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments. And subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. That evening, I walked through downtown, past the places that had been theirs. At the lantern rooftop, the same golden lights blinked against the glass. I stepped inside, ordered a club soda, and sat at the same table where my world had ended. The waiter looked at me, recognition flickering. "You're the one from that night, right?" I smiled. "I'm the one who came back." The skyline was the same, but the weight behind it had changed. Every building looked like it was exhaling with me. As the city pulsed below, I saw 2 people step off the elevator, Elena and Carter. Of course. They had to see me, to test whether I'd still flinch. She froze. He stared. I didn't move. She approached, makeup too perfect, smile cracked at the edges. "You must be happy now," she said quietly. "You got what you wanted." "No," I said. "You got what you earned." Carter stepped forward, voice raw. "We lost everything, Zaria." I looked at him, the man who'd once been my future. "No," I said softly. "You lost me. Everything else was just borrowed time." He flinched, the way people do when truth sounds like a mirror shattering. Elena's eyes glistened. "Do you hate me?" I thought about that for a moment. "No," I said. "I don't have the energy for hate. I spend it building something real." And I walked past them, leaving the ghosts of who we were sitting under their own spotlight. The next morning, my story was everywhere. Blogs, podcasts, small magazines. They called it The Designer Who Exposed Deception. I hadn't spoken to any of them, but people had filled in the blanks. It wasn't gossip anymore. It was cautionary history. At the gallery, new visitors came to see Borrowed Fires. One woman stood in front of the last canvas, a silhouette holding a torch in the dark. "This one," she said, "feels like forgiveness." "It's not," I told her. "It's endurance," She nodded. Maybe that's the same thing. That night, I got an email from Sophie. They're moving away, starting over somewhere else. Thought you should know. I closed the laptop and turned off every light in my apartment. In the dark, I whispered, "Good." Because revenge hadn't made me better. It had cleared the air so healing could finally breathe. A week later, I spoke at the gallery's closing event. People expected fire. I gave them calm. I used to think closure was an apology, I said. Now I know it's a decision. You decide it's enough. You stop performing your pain for people who profited from it. You rebuild quietly, and one day you realize the silence doesn't scare you anymore. Applause rose, soft but real. I met every eye and smiled. Outside, Tasha hugged me. So what now? I looked at the city lights reflecting on her car. Now I build something bigger. When I got home, I pulled down the napkin plan from the wall. Legal, work, art, community. Each word had been checked off, lived through, transformed. Underneath the napkin, the wall was clean. I pressed my palm against it and whispered, "Thank you." Then I sat at the table, opened a blank page in my notebook, and wrote the first line of whatever came next. This isn't about them anymore. Because the strike wasn't about destroying them. It was about reclaiming the story they thought they owned. And that story was mine again. Revenge always looks glamorous in stories. Headlines, gasps, the villain exposed. But in real life, public reckoning happens slowly. Like cracks spreading through glass until one morning you realize the whole window has fallen out. It started with an article. Not the gossip kind, but a real piece in a business ethics magazine. Title: Integrity Over Image, the designer who challenged corporate collusion. It never used their names, but everyone knew. The reporter had pieced together the timeline from public filings, complaint records, and the gallery's quiet success story. I didn't give interviews. I just answered one email confirming the facts. The rest wrote itself. By the time it circulated on LinkedIn, the comments section had turned into a debate about power, loyalty, and gender politics in creative industries. This woman did what HR should have. We need more Zarias. Imagine having the guts to hold your own firm accountable. Every notification felt like an echo saying, "You weren't crazy." At the same time, Elena and Carter's story was dissolving. Their firm didn't fire them outright, but the board restructured. She lost her clients. He was quietly demoted to a consultant position with no direct reports. They had planned a spring wedding. The venue leaked a cancellation notice. The words "personal circumstances" never sounded so final. Tasha texted me a link with a single line. Karma's LinkedIn post hit different. I smiled. Karma wasn't magic. It was math finally balancing itself. The ripple spread farther than I expected. I got invited to speak at a panel about creative ownership and ethics. Standing on that stage, lights bright and audience full, I talked about boundaries, about what happens when women's loyalty gets mistaken for compliance. "I'm not an activist," I said. "I just refuse to be quiet." Someone in the crowd shouted, "That's activism!" The laughter that followed felt like sunlight. When the moderator asked what I learned, I said, "The truth always has better timing than revenge. You just have to stay alive long enough to hear it." Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. After the panel, a young woman approached me. "I'm interning at the same firm they used to work for," she said, voice trembling. "People still whisper about you. They say you burned everything down." I tilted my head. "Do they tell you what grew after?" She shook her head. "No." "Then tell them it's a forest now," I said, smiling. That week, the gallery offered to make Borrowed Fires a traveling exhibit. We sent prints to Austin, then Houston, then Denver. Each city sold out faster than the last. My inbox filled with stories from people who'd been betrayed and built something anyway. Reading them, I realized the story wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to anyone who'd been silenced and decided to make noise. Even Clara changed. She began adding a clause in every client contract. All contributors will be credited and compensated transparently. She called it the Cross Clause. I laughed when I read it, then cried after she hung up, because that's what justice feels like sometimes. Not applause, but policies. Of course, not everyone clapped. A few of their old allies reached out under the guise of neutrality. Maybe it went too far. They've suffered enough. I answered the same every time. So did I. The difference is, I didn't deserve it. Then I blocked them. Sophie messaged me a month later. They broke up. No emojis, no exclamation points. Just fact. I thanked her. She wrote back, "She said you were the reason." I typed, "She was always the reason." Then I deleted it. Some truths don't need to be sent. I celebrated quietly that night. Music low, candles lit, my mother laughing over dinner. "You look lighter," she said. "I am," I told her. "It's easier when you stop carrying other people's shame." She raised her glass. "To silence that doesn't hurt." I clinked mine against hers. "To truth that doesn't need to scream." The reckoning wasn't just theirs. It was mine too. I started seeing the ways I'd betrayed myself. Shrinking, apologizing, loving without boundaries. I began unlearning it all. Therapy helped, time helped, but mostly, choosing differently helped. Each day I woke up and decided, I am not the version of me they made. One morning, I found an envelope under my door. No return address, just my name in handwriting I knew too well. Inside was a note from Carter. "I finally understand what you were trying to protect. I wasn't strong enough to stand next to it. I'm sorry." There was no ring, no plea, no number, just those words. I folded the letter once and placed it in the safe with the others. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was punctuation. The kind that ends a sentence so the next one can begin. When the gallery tour came back to Dallas, I stood outside on opening night and watched people file in. They didn't know the full story. They didn't need to. The art had become its own explanation. Someone asked the curator, "Who's the artist?" And she pointed at me. For a moment, all the noise fell away. Just my name, clean and whole again. I thought about that night on the rooftop, the ring, the candle. And then I realized something. I hadn't thought about them in weeks. The city lights shimmered the same way they had back then, but now they belonged entirely to me. I took a breath that reached all the way to the bottom of my ribs and smiled. The reckoning was complete. And in its quiet, something softer had started to grow. Something that looked a lot like peace. The city had finally gone quiet around my name. No whispers, no glances that lingered too long. The noise had died, and in the silence that followed, I met myself again. After the articles, the panels, the gallery shows, I expected a rush of satisfaction, the kind that could fill every hollow space inside me. But revenge doesn't give you fullness. It gives you freedom, and freedom comes with its own silence. I spent mornings on my balcony with coffee and no agenda. The sunrise didn't look like triumph. It looked like normal life finally returning. Birds chirped over the hum of traffic, and I realized I hadn't heard that sound properly in months. That's what peace does. It brings back things you didn't notice you'd lost. At work, I stopped being the woman who exposed them. I was just Zaria again. Projects flowed, clients trusted me. My designs carried stories that had nothing to do with pain anymore. Clara said once, "You've become a brand." I laughed. No, I just remembered who I was before I dimmed myself to fit into someone else's light. Evenings I painted again, but not borrowed fires. This new series was softer, smaller, full of color and air. I called it Reclaimed. Each canvas was a love letter to the self that had survived everything. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. A few months later, I got a message from Sophie. She moved to Arizona. He left the city. They're quiet now. I didn't reply. What was there to say? Their absence wasn't victory. It was just the end of noise. Tasha and I met for brunch one Saturday. She raised her glass and said, "So what's next?" "Nothing dramatic," I said. "Just living. Boring." "Exactly." That afternoon, we wandered through a small art fair. I stopped at a booth selling handmade journals. The vendor smiled. "You look like someone who writes her own stories." I smiled back. I learned the hard way to do exactly that. One evening, I visited my mother. She was tending her garden, humming some old gospel tune. "You finally look rested," she said. "I am." "Still think about them?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "But they don't hurt anymore. They're just characters in a story I already finished." She nodded. "That's when you know you've healed, when you can tell the story without bleeding." We sat there in silence, the sky stretching gold over her roses. I thought about every version of myself I had been: the hopeful girlfriend, the betrayed woman, the strategist, the survivor, the artist. They all existed inside me still, but they no longer argued. They'd become one voice. One night, I opened my old safe for the last time. Inside were the documents, the evidence, the letters. I read the first page, my old notes from that awful night. My handwriting was shaky, desperate. He proposed to her. I ran my hand across the words like touching the ghost of a wound. Then I closed the folder, walked to the balcony, and watched the wind lift the city's lights. I didn't burn the papers. I didn't need to. Leaving them in the dark felt right. They weren't my story anymore. They were proof of the story I'd outgrown. The next morning, I donated the old furniture from that apartment, the couch where I cried, the table where I planned, even the curtains that had framed too many sad sunrises. The movers asked if I was sure. I said, completely. The emptiness left behind wasn't loss. It was space. And space, I'd learned, is the first sign of a new beginning. Later that week, the gallery owner called. "Zaria, the museum downtown wants to feature both collections, Borrowed Fires and Reclaimed, together." My chest tightened. "Together?" She laughed. "They said they tell one story, what pain builds and what peace restores." When the exhibit opened, people came in waves. I stood near the doorway, anonymous in the crowd. One woman lingered in front of a piece from Reclaimed, a simple painting of a window open to the sky. "This one feels like forgiveness," she whispered. I smiled. "It's not forgiveness. It's release," she nodded. "Maybe that's the same thing." That night, I walked home through the quiet streets. The city air was warm, the lights steady, the hum of life around me soft and endless. I thought about the rooftop, about all the moments that had once defined me. They didn't anymore. My reflection in a shop window caught my eye. I didn't see the woman who'd been broken, or the one who'd fought back. I saw someone whole, untouched by their story, undefeated by their betrayal. Just Zaria Cross, 31, from Texas. A woman who waited too long for someone else's promise but finally made her own. When I got home, I opened my notebook one last time and wrote, "You survived. You rebuilt. You didn't need their apology to start over. You became your own closure." I closed it gently and whispered, "Thank you," to the woman I used to be. The past didn't answer. It didn't have to. There's a difference between endings and exits. Endings close doors. Exits lead to somewhere new. Mine was both. The morning after the Reclaimed exhibit closed, I woke up without an alarm. The sun painted the ceiling soft gold, the kind of light that asks nothing from you. No deadlines. No ghosts, just peace. I lay there, listening to the hum of the city, feeling the quiet pride that comes when survival turns into living. I made coffee and stepped onto the balcony. The air smelled of rain, and for the first time in years I didn't think about them. Not the rooftop, not the betrayal, not even the revenge. They were background noise in a life that had found a new melody. My phone buzzed. Another email from the museum. They wanted to feature me in a documentary about women redefining power in art. A year ago, I would have said no, too afraid of being seen. But now visibility didn't feel like exposure. It felt like proof. That night, I sat down to write my segment. I started with the truth. I once waited for someone to choose me. Now I choose myself, every day. The producer called it powerful. I called it necessary. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. Weeks passed, quiet but full. My routine settled into something simple. Work, art, laughter, long walks. My therapist asked, "What do you want to build next?" "Peace," I said, "the kind that stays." Sometimes people still wrote to me, strangers, women, even men, sharing how my story gave them courage. I always wrote back the same thing. You already had the courage. You just needed the reminder. One afternoon, I received a message from an unknown address. Just 3 words, "I saw your work." There was no signature, but I knew who it was. For a moment, I thought of replying. Then I smiled, closed my phone, and let silence be my final word. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't a conversation. It's a decision you make without them. Months later, I drove back to Marfa. The desert was the same, wide, endless, honest. I parked by the same small cabin, the wind playing with my hair. I walked into the studio where I had first painted out my rage. The walls still smelled faintly of turpentine and dust. On the old wooden table sat my first sketchbook, left behind months ago. I opened it. The first page read, "Everything I will take back." I smiled and wrote underneath, "And everything I will let go." Then I closed it for good. When I returned to Dallas, the museum released the documentary. People stopped me in cafes, airports, elevators. "You're that artist," they said. "The one who turned heartbreak into art." Every time I smiled and said, "No, I turned it into myself." And it was true. The woman I had become wasn't built from spite or pain. She was built from clarity, from strength that didn't need validation, from knowing that sometimes you have to lose people to find your own gravity. A year to the day after the rooftop, I stood outside the lantern again. Same skyline, same glow, but a different ending. Inside, new faces celebrated new beginnings. None of them knew my story, and I liked it that way. I ordered a glass of wine, toasted to the city, and whispered, "We're good now." The wind carried the words away. I waited years for him to propose. He never did. But life did. It proposed something better. Freedom. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too deserve respect and unconditional love. Because sometimes closure isn't about revenge or apology. It's about learning that peace is the loudest justice of all. So I'll leave you with this. When the people who hurt you finally fade from the crowd, will you still know who you are without the noise?